Good morning and welcome everybody. I am very, very happy as Triestina to open this first day of ESOF 2020. A big bravo to all the organizers for this big event, so important for the science world and for Trieste. We will talk about responsible creativity. I am Barbara Franchin, the founder of ITS since 2002, a fashion design contest committed to observe, analyze, support, and preserve young fashion creativity. Join me today for this panel on responsible creativity are Marina Spadafora, fashion designer, Fashion Revolution Country Coordinator, Italy, who will address the power of consumer and introduce fashion revolution. Matteo Ward, co-founder verge, who will address innovative and purpose-led design. Sara Sozzani Maino, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Vogue Italia, Head of Vogue Talents and International Brand Ambassador, Camera Nazionale della Moda Italiana, who will address the importance of media in supporting responsible projects and communicating change. Thank you very much to be here with us today. A small introduction to this panel from my side. We were on the journey of increased awareness towards living responsibly in relation to nature, acting against the huge ecological footprint the human race has on our planet. Industry all over the world, pushed by institutional and people's demand, we just want to remember to everybody the 17 ONU pillars for sustainability practices were beginning to include sustainability in their agenda. Then came COVID-19. Coronavirus turned to be an abrupt slowdown of such a positive process. It even made things worse, with tons on disposable masks and gloves thrown to the waste, because everything we do has an impact on the environment. It can be a physical action, like washing the dishes, using an air dryer, buying takeaway food, or it can be a digital action, like writing an email, posting content, sending an SMS, browsing to the website. Rethink sustainable is a very complex process. Fashion is up there on the podium as one of the most polluting industry. Its CO2 emission represent 10% of a global emission and are expected to increase 60% in the next decades. For example, the production of a t-shirt requires 600 liters of water. What a lucky human being drink for survival in 1 or 2 years depends. Cotton fields are sprayed with 1/4 of all pesticides produced globally, and 70% of our garments feature synthetic fibers, usually responsible for the spread of microplastic. 80% of all clothing goes to waste. Only 1% gets recycled for the moment. And what is the power of the consumer? I kindly ask to Marina to explain what we can do as consumers. So please, Marina.
Thank you, Barbara. Happy to be on this panel. The consumer, which is all of us really, have a tremendous power. every time we spend our money, we really vote for the world that we want for ourselves, for our children, and for everybody. Because even the smallest purchase goes to finance whoever the money goes to. So I think that it's very, very important through education in schools that, in my opinion, should start from a very early age. I am very happy to say that in Italy, something called Educazione Civica was reintroduced in the elementary schools. And it's so important because if a young child starts hearing about responsible behavior in all areas from a very early age, we will have more responsible citizens growing up. So, yes, we all have a tremendous power. Of course, each one of us individually can do something, but as we become organized in organisms and the political arenas, then we can do much, much more. This is why when Ursula de Castro, who is one of the founders of Fashion Revolution, asked me to be the country coordinator of this amazing movement, I said yes, because I do believe that we have more power when we work together. And Fashion Revolution, which I'm going to introduce now, is exactly this. We pull together many, many people from different walks of life, from students to professionals to everyone, really, with one question. The question is, who made my clothes? So we basically ask everyone before buying something just to ask themselves, who made this? Because let's not forget that fashion is one of the most labor intensive industries that we have in the world today. There's still people sewing our t-shirts. There's still people picking cotton in many countries. So there's a lot of energy, a lot of sweat and tears from people from maybe faraway countries. But as we know, humanity is one organism. We have to look at humanity as in a holistic way, where really everything that happens, even if something happens in Far East Asia, it affects us because we're all united. This is why Fashion Revolution started, because of a terrible accident that happened in Bangladesh in 2013. A whole production complex called Rana Plaza collapsed and killed more than 1,000 people and injured terribly 2,500 people. From that moment, everybody was outraged, and I think it was a moment of reckoning where a lot of people said, okay, there's something extremely wrong if people have to die to make cheap clothes. And I can't be a part of this anymore. And this is when Ursula de Castro and Carrie Sommers in London decided to fund Fashion Revolution. So from 2013 to 2020, we are now in 111 countries in the world. And we're doing a fantastic job, if I may so say, because a lot of people, thanks to Fashion Revolution, have become more aware, have become better consumers, more careful consumers. But like I said, we only can attain serious change and serious, you know, progress if we have a political action. This is why Fashion Revolution is so important. We, together with other 60 organizations, proposed just a few months ago to the European Parliament a shadow policy called Responsible Textiles. And it's a proposal to put in place serious rules and regulations about the textile industry. Because at the moment, a lot of regulations are just you can do something, but there is not a law that imposes this on you. So it's all self-regulated, it's all on a voluntary base. And there's a lot of really great initiatives like the one taken by Macron at the G7. Fantastic, but it's all on a voluntary basis. So we need this to become mandatory and not voluntary. We have seen this in the food industry and in the cosmetic industry, where there are very strict laws that say that if you declare something that is false on the back of a package of food or on the back of a makeup kit, you can go to jail because people can die if you're allergic to peanuts or anything. And you don't declare that peanuts are present in that product, you choke and you die. Well, the same goes for clothing. The skin is the biggest, largest organ in our body. So everything we put on this organ can affect the body, and not only on a superficial skin level. And so a lot of the allergies and dermatological illnesses come from contact with things that we put on our body that have been dyed with the wrong dyes. For example, there are laws all over the world that say that we cannot longer dye things with um, heavy metal colorants, and we have to use azo-free colorants, which means they're without the heavy metals. But as you know, we import things from countries where these laws are not in place, and unfortunately at the borders there are not the right kind of checks being done. And so this merchandise comes in our shops, and we actually buy it and wear it. And now they're finding out also that this kind of colorants not only stop at the skin, but they go deeper and they go to the DNA, and cause serious ailments. So we need two major push. One is a grassroots movement. This is what we are working with Fashion Revolution, with people, with students, with creating events, creating awareness. Actually, the three of us here, plus another friend, have created, thanks to Sarah, a movement called A New Awareness, because it's so important to create awareness in the consumers. But if we don't have the laws that also back up this kind of involvement by the consumer, we're not going anywhere. So it's very important for governments and political entities to recognize that fashion is a very important industry. Unfortunately, fashion suffers from stigma that people say, fashion is frivolous, it's all about pretty clothes, it's not serious. Excuse me, it's very serious. It gives work to almost 70 million people around the world. And these people, a lot of them are not treated fairly. They cannot get organized in unions. They receive a very, very low pay, which corresponds to the minimum pay that the governments decide in each country. But studies from many organizations, among which Clean Clothes Campaign, Fair Wear, and Fashion Revolution, have found out that actually the minimum wage is only 1/5 of what a person needs to survive with dignity. To survive with dignity, you need a living wage. A living wage is what covers your costs. Minimum cost, which is clothing, food, rent, medical, school for the kids. And what happens if you don't have this in place? Then children have to go to work because the family has to put all its workforce in place in order to survive. So we are working towards a more just and a more green fashion industry because, like you said quite rightly, I mean, a lot of people say we are the second most polluting industry in the world. Apparently, it's not true, but we are up in the first five. So even if we're not the second, we're the third or the fourth, doesn't matter. We still pollute like there's no tomorrow. Matteo lives in Veneto. It's an area, and you live very close by, that is being dramatically polluted by industry, especially fashion industry, since the 60s. And now the water that runs into the taps of people in Veneto, and if not in the whole Valpadana, are tainted waters that create horrible pathological illnesses. So it is important. Fashion is important. It gives work to a lot of people. It has to be fair and it has to be clean. And there's really no two ways about it. And I won't shut up until it happens, and so won't my friends on this panel. So yeah, this is the state of things. I would like, if that's okay, to share a small video that was done for Fashion Revolution, that won the Fashion Film Festival 2 years ago, and it's a very impactful, lovely video. So I hope I'm going to do everything correctly technically. So I'm going to share.
Dear Marina, we have a question from the audience. So, what about the using of the fur? And what about to reduce the number of the collection, the number of the clothes that are produced in the world? So the audience need to understand more, because we are in the process and we know many things and many information, but people from the audience need to understand more about food and about why so many clothes are still produced.
Yes, I think all of us have to follow a golden rule, which Vivienne Westwood talks about all the time, which is buy less, buy of better quality, and make it last. So I think that when we buy something, we should really fall in love with this item. And we should really make sure that this item has been made following what we feel is right. So yes, unfortunately, I have to say, we have to produce less. It's not sustainable. What fast fashion has done to the industry is appalling. They have created a huge amount of clothes that gets produced and thrown onto the market almost weekly. And what this has caused in the luxury industry is that luxury is chasing fast fashion by making more special collection drops, this, that, and the other, and showing so many times a year. So Mr. Armani wrote a very interesting and powerful letter to Women's Wear Daily saying, let's slow down. We have to go back to twice a year doing the fashion shows. We have to have coats and sweaters in the shops in September and October, November, December, not in July or in June. It's ridiculous. And then he was followed by Dries Van Noten, who created a big movement about the luxury brands. Gucci is, in on board with this movement. So yes, please buy consciously, buy something that you truly love and that you can see will stay in your closet for a long time and that you will wear for a long time. Because nowadays, apparently we buy more, but we wear less. So some things even finish in the bin with their original tag on it. That is a crime against nature, against the workers who sweated and worked for nothing, for peanuts to make this. So let's breathe, count to 33 before we pull our credit card out when we're in a shop. And let's really, really ask ourselves the question, who made this? How much was this person paid? Was the environment polluted while this was made? Do I really need it? Have I assessed what's in my closet? I just wrote a book that it's called The Revolution Starts from Your Closet, quindi la rivoluzione comincia dal tuo armadio, which is exactly this. Look inside your closet and see how much you have. But then if you clean your closet, don't throw it away, give it to your friends, organize a swap with your girlfriends at the house or boyfriends, and share items. Never throw clothing away. It's like throwing bread away. You can't. It's really bad.
Exactly. So this
Yeah.
is a process that include, as you said before, also the food. We do the same thing with food. We
Yeah.
buy a lot of food, we put on the fridge there, thinking that first and then we will eat, and then we will not.
Yeah.
And we will throw it on the garbage. So it's a question of our consciousness. We need to understand that our action has a big influence of our planet, on our planet.
I mean, if we think that every year we arrive at a famous overshoot day. Overshoot day is when we have used all the resources that cannot be replenished in the world. Last year, overshoot day was in July. This year, it happened in August because we had the lockdown. So we, unquote, polluted a little bit less. But yes, we use too much. We are too greedy and we have to slow down.
I just want to tell one old story, one thing. My grandmother, 100 years ago, she was the 19 on 10 sisters, all women, all sisters, and she used to have just one clothes, one. And when these clothes need to be washed, she stayed in the bed until the clothes was dried. So, this is very important 100 years ago, and if I open my armoire, I can see a lot of things and I can shame on me. So this is very important. It's a personal process and a globally process. In our philosophy of life, what we need and what we don't need, the false need, this is very important to understand.
Yeah.
So, Matteo, now it's your turn. You can start, and you will talk about innovative and purpose-led design. Thank you, Marina.
Yes. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, Barbara. I'll start off from some things that were said in your conversation. Number one, how are we not evaluating the impact of the fashion industry, of an industry that is per se today taking essential resources that are essential to give people food, to give people water, to create non-essential products, and to create these non-essential products at a rate which is increasing every single year. We are around 100 billion garments a year right now that are being produced. As Marina said, over 30% of these of these clothing doesn't even get worn. People buy it, but they leave it in their wardrobe. And some statistics, numbers range, but some people say that on average, the average teenager, unfortunately, only after 4 Instagram posts, they tend to trash the clothing. Other people wear on average from 4 to 7 times. And because it's so cheap, we throw it away. This is the reality of a system that is unsustainable, but a system that in physics probably would have ceased to exist in a heartbeat, because it's think about the fashion industry almost like a circle. It takes positive inputs from the environment and society, such as clean air, land, water. From society, it takes our labor, our time, our skills, our culture. We're talking about culture appropriation so recently as well. And in return, it doesn't give anything but negative outputs. Up until 67 years ago, people were getting dressed because they needed to get dressed, because number one, it's illegal to go around naked, and number two, we need to protect ourselves from weather conditions. If it's cold, we need to cover ourselves. If it's hot, we need to have, naturally insulating clothing. Then we started to overproduce at increasing rates. Therefore, what positive output is the fashion industry giving us at this point? Like, can we truly answer yes to the question whether we believe that fashion houses and fashion designers today are answering and responding to the true needs of humanity, when the outputs it's producing is an excessive clothing, pollution, health issues for garment workers and users alike, as Marina has pointed out, and obviously then some people may argue, well, it gives salary, it gives people jobs, but only a very, very tiny fraction of the people who work in the fashion industry have a salary, have a decent salary, and some of the wealth that's created is increasingly and unevenly distributed. Where up until 2018, in the top 5 people of the richest people in the world, you could find 2 that belong to the fashion industry. When on the other end of the spectrum, we have over 80 million people that live in modern day slavery. So how is the system sustainable? From the standpoint of a research and trying to figure out how to really challenge the status quo and redefine the paradigms to rebalance a system that needs to function in a proper way, meaning not depleting resources, but generating social environmental value. A lot of focus at the beginning of the research was given to understanding truly the status quo and the relationship between fashion and some key impact areas. Also, through Fashion Revolution, we have identified 5 already 5 years ago, which is number 1, water, which is the most essential resource. Number 2, chemical management. Number 3, the use of fossil fuels. We have over on female apparel, we have on average 70% of the clothing today that are made with fossil fuel based fibers. Men's around 60%. So over half of our clothing are made with petrol-based fibers in an area when we're trying to decarbonize, and that's absolutely insane. And then we have issues with waste management, climate change, and obviously people. So if we structure our focus area and research into understanding the relationship between the industry and these macro segments, then we can start breaking down and figuring out what's the best way to engineer clothing today that can really address the true needs of humanity. That's kind of like the design methodology that we have to adopt. Think about the needs and then try to use clothing as a medium to answer those needs. And education and communication plays a pivotal role in this, because there cannot be true paradigm shift, of true revolutionary shift, if we only focus on the private sector, thinking that they will be the ones to invest heavily in changing the status quo. they have pressure to do so. We have seen specifically, I think I can speak for all of us, in the past 3 years, a surge in companies and brands and fashion houses investing heavily in innovative design. But at the same time, it is a demand-driven market. You have to question yourself, would have this happened if players like Fashion Revolution hadn't activate 200 million people demanding a more fair and transparent industry? Question mark. So are the motives genuine? So that's why private sector needs to work along the public sector, promoting the kind of legislation and giving the incentives and also the regulations that are needed to give finally some boundaries within which fashion houses are expected to operate in order to safeguard essential resources that are needed to sustain life on planet Earth. And then you also have the finance sector that plays a huge role. Communication and education is something that all of these players can tackle. And specifically when, I believe them to be specifically effective when they approach the issue and trying to make people understand that it's closer than we think. It's very hard for all of us because we have our daily life, we have our daily things to take care of, and each and everyone has relatively bigger or smaller problems, and it is hard sometimes to relate to things that happen millions of kilometers away from where we are. I see that the message about the fashion industry unfortunately polluting rivers in China, Southeast Asia, doesn't resonate in Italy as much as making people understand that this is not just a China issue or a Bangladesh issue or Vietnamese issue. It is an issue that we have behind our doors. Marina mentioned it earlier. I'm half Italian from Vicenza, and the entire district here between Vicenza, Treviso, Padova, primarily is a huge hub for fashion manufacturing, luxury fashion manufacturing, accessories, leather, worldwide. Like there's all of the biggest players in the world coming here for one or several, if not all, steps of their life cycle chain for product development. What was that? What was the result of that? It started off in the 50s and the 60s. The area in Veneto right after World War II was extremely poor, and it was a rural and agricultural based industry economy. And then we started to develop this entrepreneurial mindset that we can become better than that, and we can achieve some sort of our own industrial revolution. And it was pursued at all costs, meaning putting profit before anything else. Everyone started to undergo and follow an idea of progress that put the needs of the environment and people in second, third, if not last priority. The end result here, just to mention one, is that right now in the province of Vicenza, we have over 100,000 people born in between we're testing just because they're testing this range, but 1980 to 2000 that are being monitored for being intoxicated by a specific type of chemical polymer, PFAS, that has been used to initially treat leather to make it hydro-repellent, but then it was also used for any other type of textile, and not just the textile industry, but also other, the food industry and other industries as well. It started off in the 60s when a lot of players in the area started to try out the use of chemicals in the fashion industry to bring progress in textile making. And from a stylist thinking perspective, have they achieved that? Yes, they probably created something that nobody else had before. Hydro-repellent fabrics, they're more, technically they perform better. But systemic thinking wasn't adopted, and we were really considering in the equation whether that output had a cost that was higher than the good that it created. In 1977, we experienced in the province of Vicenza the first big spill of these chemicals in our lands. That is reported. Before that, they were simply just unleading all of the wastewater management from the chemical creations into our water streams, rivers. If you ask my grandma, she remembers the days when rivers would turn blue or yellow or red, depending on the season. And this is something that we hear about China today, but we're like, no, it's something that happened here 60 years ago. Like, we think we're better, we're not. And we've just been great, better at hiding it for so long. 1977, the first reported case. From 1977 to 1988, 1992, 2013, several reports were made about the extreme pollution of the area caused by these chemicals in our water streams. Long story short, it wasn't until 2019 that they started to really clean up and bonify in a serious structure plan the area. And right now, I even have friends that are my age, so not too old. I'm saying that because people tell me I'm getting old, but that are started to develop, unfortunately, specific type of cancer in worst case scenarios, thyroid dysfunctions in best case scenarios that are treatable, but they have to live with a pill for the rest of their life, simply because they've been drinking the tap water that even myself I was even told when I was a kid that it's safe because people check it over here. And that's a result of uncontrolled and unchecked, product making, clothing making that we didn't really need, and we didn't really ask for that. So our question is that really progress? How can we change that? Systemic thinking is very, very important. In a systemic thinking analysis in 2009, a scientific community, Dr. Rockstrom came up with a model called the 9 planetary boundaries model, which aims at defining the limits within which we can operate in order to balance inadvertently Earth and tip it to a scenario where it's impossible for the system to rebalance itself. So we obviously work within that model as well. Unfortunately, when we talk about the fashion industry in terms of biodiversity loss, which is a huge factor, we've already exceeded the limit. If I think about the area here, the one thing that you probably understood I'm mostly concerned of is water management, because water is the most essential resource. A lot of reports say that the wars of the future will be fought for water. And when I think about an industry that it is, again, in terms of water consumption and water pollution, in the top 5, again, in the world, which is scary. And when you have the World Bank that's been saying for years, more than 20% of global water industrial pollution comes from the fashion industry, you ask yourself, why do we have to do this? Do we really need to produce 100 billion garments and destroy the resource upon which everything depends? On this point, I wanted to show you the trailer to a movie that you can easily find online. It's called River Blue, and explains the relationship between the industry and our water resources really well. So I'm going to share it right now.
We have a very small amount of water, and that's got to accommodate the needs that humans have for drinking water, and a lot of that water is not accessible.
We are committing hydrocide. We are deliberately murdering our rivers.
Our rivers across the world were being deeply impacted by the dumping of poisonous toxic material.
Every single piece of clothing that you buy comes with a cost.
The fabric dyes used contain hazardous materials, things like mercury, cadmium, and lead.
These kind of chemicals, they don't break down, and they travel around the world.
This water is so toxic, there is no aquatic life.
If you see how people are living there, they have lost their sensory adaptation. They can't smell anymore.
They do have problems with drinking water supply. There's a high incidence of liver cancers.
If we continue like this, it's done. It's done.
Maybe it's because the demand of the world has gone crazy.
The statistics are insane. Something like 80 billion garments of clothes are being delivered out of factories.
Those products are actually sold to the world's biggest brand names.
A lot of companies do things that are very, very hidden and very secret.
So the pipe is underground. You cannot really see this factory that is dumping this.
You don't learn the details because at the end of the day, it's not a selling point.
The consumer did not wake up one morning saying, I want to buy 5 pairs of jeans for a fraction of the price. We were literally introduced to this concept by the fashion industry.
If you have 2 jeans, one is damaging the planet, the other one not, and the price is the same, no one will choose the wrong one. I mean, there's no excuse.
I think all corporations have to be accountable for their environmental practices, and no one has a right to damage or destroy a river.
Okay, Matteo, thank you very much. We have other questions from the audience. So, do we really need to use not human animals' skin for fashion, like fur, leather, feather? So, what is the role of science in developing alternatives?
A good question, and it's been, I think, one of the core research and development field right now, trying to develop bio-based, fully biological materials that can have the same functionality of products like leather, which undoubtedly, it has been used for thousands of years because it's extremely durable. It has a lot of functional properties, but at the same time, not having to harm and deeply affect our environmental system, our ecosystems. In the field, they're bio-based materials right now that come from grapes, the bio-based materials that come from cactuses, bio-based materials that come from algae. It's all work in progress. Everyone in the industry is paying a close attention to what's coming. I think we're still in some areas we are a little bit more advanced. In some areas we're still at an early stage. At the end of the day, obviously, we have to come to senses. If it made sense 200, 300, 400 years ago to wear leather because it was extremely balanced, it was a part of a very balanced equilibrium that is part of each and every single natural ecosystem. Yes. Can we argue that is valid today when the leather comes? Yes, it's a byproduct of the food industry, but be careful in using that claim. This is every time I tell people that work in leather, because the food industry itself, that's based on the consumption of meat, is extremely polluting. And I don't think we really need, when we order some meat, to have a roast beef sandwich that is as thick as 20 centimeters. We throw away all of that. It's the same mentality, the same process. Do we need all of this stuff? No. We need balance. Yes. So I welcome any research and any startups that's working in that specific field.
Okay, a second question. Globalization kills craftsmanship. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's time to go local? So to produce more locally, to come back to produce more locally. So to restore production, especially in Italy.
Yes, but I'm going to say this with again, yes, but my question wants to be balanced. Meaning, I think it's a shame that we have standardized culture so much that we are losing so many traditions and cultures and art, art craftsmanship and artisanal traditions all around the world. And Marina is an expert on this because she has devoted her life and career to it as well. And anytime I see people even unconsciously falling into the missteps of cultural appropriation, it's something that we have to be very wary of, and trying to figure out the best way to challenge that and make sure that we become champions for diversity and inclusion and respect every single culture and amplify them and keep them alive. That's part of our heritage and our tradition. If we lose that, there cannot be real progress, and then we end up being a fully profit-based, society globally. At the same time, 100% reshoring will be very, very, negatively impactful. At the end of the day, today you have millions, tens of millions of garment workers that are based in developing countries or in developed countries all over the world. Therefore, the answer cannot be that all of a sudden each and every single company around the world takes production out of Bangladesh, takes production out of China. We put production there. Right now, it is our responsibility to make sure that we do it in the best way possible to keep those economies and those systems alive, paying people a living wage, and making sure social justice goes along with environmental justice in keeping fashion industry and fashion production there. What I'm a big fan of is producing in an area and selling that area. Therefore, you would even cut CO2 emissions. That's kind of right now where a lot of brands, a lot of companies, and a lot of research is going as well. Local production for that specific market. That would be really cool, I think, to see adopted worldwide.
Absolutely. So we understand that we need a real culture change, and we need to educate parents and teens and everybody to another way to consider product, to consider how we use product, how we use our resources, and yes, the consciousness that the resources are limited and the planet need to breathe. So, Sara, how communication is acting in both cases, in the wrong communication and the right communication.
Oh, well, hello everyone. Very happy to be part of this panel. And obviously what Marina and Matteo said until now, it's really like kind of the real, truth of what's happening right now in the world. So it's something that it's not stopping even now that we are talking in this panel. And I do think that right now media has the responsibility to say the truth, but it's also the way to say it, because as me, I speak as media, but also as someone that it's very aware of myself polluting and myself, learning a way how to be better. So even when Marina was saying before, we launched, the three of us, with Hakan, which is the fourth, a platform or a movement called A New Awareness, is, to give awareness to those people which are the new generation, which obviously is our future, and have, to believe in change, but also to our generation or the older generation to be conscious about how can change make. Because Marina was saying, when you go into a shop and you use your money and you buy something, you're already deciding how you want, the final result to be. So you have to be conscious about knowing what you're buying and what's happening behind. So going back to media and to awareness, what we need to do is to give the example of startups, of people that want to change the world, and make them understand how can this happen, because it's fundamental. Right now, we are bombarded by social media, by internet, by news, but not really anyone is giving. Few, unfortunately, are giving the right direction of how things can change, such as fashion revolution. Because not because Marina is in this panel, but I think it's a platform where it's very clear how things can change, and it's very simple. How can it be done? And I think this is something fundamental, because for me, I've been kind of more aware about what the fashion does to the planet and the pollution, like maybe for the last 5 or 6 years, so it's not so long. But at the same time, we always say it's always better late than never. And I do think it's important to give the message as much clear and kind of simple way, because people, when you begin to talk about the word sustainability, that right now has kind of lost its sense, because everyone is putting it in their mouth but not really knowing what they're saying, is that you have to really explain it as if you're explaining it to a boy or a girl of 3 years old, but you have to explain it to an adult, because people think it's boring, because it's complicated, because it's expensive, because they don't understand it, they don't want to know how to understand it, because we are kind of lazy. So I think it has to become a way of thinking, and in your normal system, about going into a bar and having your coffee, and then maybe they're asking you an orange juice, and they give you a plastic straw and say, you know what, you can keep your plastic straw because I don't want to use your plastic straw. So it's also all those daily things that people do that need to begin to make them think, how can it be better? So I think, going back to my role as media, is that we need to give the example. We need to I have the opportunity to be head of Vogue Talents, which has always been supporting the new generation and supporting all those talents that do not have the spotlight or the right place to be seen. And this was done for fashion, creativity, photography, styling, and everything. And now I'm kind of directing the light to those who really want to make the change. But the change, it's not just about making responsible clothes, but because what does it mean, making responsible clothes? There's much more behind. There's also social communities and also local communities, as you were saying before, about helping local communities to go back and work. Because right now, during the lockdown, obviously it's been a disaster for everyone. It's been a challenge, but it's also been a big change for everyone. And people went back local because they didn't want to go in big supermarket, because they were afraid. And so they decided to go back to their small markets that before they weren't. So we always have to see a positive way of when there are big challenges. But why cannot this be back to normal? Why can local people, which obviously are more sustainable than big chains, cannot come back and be represented and be supported as they should be? So I think that media has this very important role, and more about also those fashion brands that are the ones that the major polluters, but they are also the major brands that can make the big change, because it's the brands that everyone looks at. It's the ones that people would like to buy, but they cannot buy because they're expensive. So I do think also that big brands have the responsibility of communicating that they want to make a change, and that they're doing it, even though we always discuss with Marina and Matteo that probably they never want to really communicate it since the beginning, because obviously when you make changes, you cannot make it from one day to another. So there is that way through of being not, kind of controversial, because you say, well, I'm a big company. Now I communicate that I'm gonna do a responsible collection, but then I have still 80% of my company that has problem of social, that people are not paid the right wage. But you have to start somewhere, because if not, people won't understand that the change is happening. So it's not that you can wait to be perfect, because we perfectly know that it doesn't exist to be responsible 100% with the way the world has been conceived and the way we are bringing it on. But I think it's important that there is the voice of people that wants to make the change, because then we as human beings are a little bit, when there is, it says in in Italiano, pifferaio magico, you follow the one that gives the voice. And it's a little bit, I mean, it's not a nice way of seeing, but people, follow that when there is a trend, when something happens, and now there's all the, electric monopattini that everyone wants. So, well, that's in a way sustainable because it's electric. So we need to create more groups of believing of change, because then people, who doesn't even have, the possibility to understand, but at least they follow someone that knows that they're doing the right change. So I think also big brands and the fashion system has a huge responsibility right now of thinking to communicate a change. And it doesn't have to be when it's already done, but it's the making of, because you also have to be seen fragile and knowing that you have to learn, because big brands think that they're all perfect, but nobody's perfect. We are here to learn. I'm here to learn. Even today, probably in this panel, we are learning new things. So I do think that this is the role that we have to have.
Sorry, my microphone was on off. Sorry. Sarah, how we can defend ourselves as consumers, as humans, because first of all we are humans being, and then consumers, from the communication of the big brands. Only an example. We, as EAT, the contest that we organize, we are in contact with many students. More than 1,000 students apply every year. And 4 years ago, we did a survey asking to everybody their opinion about sustainability, about what they need, what we need to change, what they think we can do. And which brand they believe can be the best in terms of sustainability. And what came out has been very surprising, a big confusion. So go against the fast fashion was the first thing to do from the student side, but in the same moment they considered I have to name the label H&M as one of the most sustainable brands in the world. So they're in the fourth position 4 years ago. Okay, so how we can defend ourselves? Okay, probably to be more clever, to be more, but how we can do? We are surrounded of communication. Sign-ups.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a challenge, but I think it's like in life, you make choices. You choose to be a better person. You choose to think in a better way, and you choose what you buy. I mean, you said it about your grandmother, that probably was 100 years ago, so it was different. But I always remember Marina saying this thing, which is right. You go to the market and you decide to buy food, and you look at the ingredients of the food because you want to understand what you are eating, what you are. And it's the same of the clothes, because the clothes, it goes on your in your skin. So it's also about choosing of buying things that are explained to you of what's the process. It's this is a choice. You make choices in life, and this is the same. Well, now we live obviously in 2020, where communication, it's all about social media and news and everything. So we totally know that there are most of the news that we know, it's always about, is it fake, is it it's. So I do think that all those people that are committed to change and that have a voice in the industry, which is not just the fashion industry, in every industry, they have to be given more space and be listened, because those are the people that are willing to do it, and they're doing it, because we are here to talk, but there are people that are very much more active than ours. But I do think that each of us have a role. We cannot think that we can make changes on everything. So we are here as media, as communicating, as change. Matteo is the new generation that wants to make a change and is making a change, and it's kind of passing the information between young people, because then it's the spread of voice. So I do think it's about that. Obviously, then you have to make choices. And one last thing, I think that obviously not everyone has the tools to understand. So that's why it's very important that education, to be responsible, goes into education. And Marina saying in Italy, it's beginning, but this has to become more and more. And because it starts all from there. You go to school, you have an education, if there is lessons dedicated to how to be more responsible after 18 years of school, and you have that kind of teachment, you come out with another way of thinking, another head, another way of wanting to live. So education is fundamental.
Yes, I think that we need to understand very clearly that yes, we still have resources in the world, but it doesn't mean that we need to use it. We need to preserve all kind of resources that we have. So there is a bigger confusion because the industrial and economical development in our world has been not globally, but it's a step by step. So United States, Europe, then we developed in a different historical moments. So for this reason, probably now we are in Europe or in United States, we are more conscious that we need to act. But the other nation that start to have the chance to buy, because buy is important. It seems to be the way in which you define yourself as a person, as a nation. But we really needed to be conscious that to have is not so important as to be, to be rather than to have the essential things. Okay, this is my personal opinion. So I have other question for the audience. I don't know who prefer to give to reply. Probably Marina. We will see. There is a person who contradict the intervent before did Matteo. So leather is not a byproduct of the food industry, the person said. India is the number 1 producer of leather, and those animals are not slaughtered for food, but for fashion. So who want to give to reply, Matteo or
No, I totally agree. No, that's the fashion industry's claim for leather, and I agree that it doesn't sustain. It's not right.
Okay, Marina, what do you think of certification such as OECO text? Is useful or that it's enough? What about this kind of work around the certification?
I think certifications are very, very important. The only unfortunate thing about certifications is that they're quite expensive. So when you have smaller brands or artisans or people that don't have a lot of financial resources, it becomes difficult to be certified. But I think it's truly important to have third-party certifications, because otherwise we're like in the Far West. Everybody does whatever they want and everybody declares whatever they want. So certifications are extremely, extremely important. I think there should be an effort done by the certifying bodies and the certifying organizations to make this a little bit more affordable, because I have worked for many, many years with a lot of artisans in many places in the world. And some of them are really, and I went to visit them, completely sustainable, but they cannot afford to get the Ecotex or the GOTS or any of these certifications, because it means thousands of euros and thousands of dollars that they don't have. So maybe these certifying entities could have sort of like a CSR program, corporate social responsibility program, where they allot a certain number of certifications to be given out to either young talent, young designers, or artisans, and give them at a discount or give them for free. Do something a little bit more proactive to help a wider number of people and brands to be able to get certified. So, but they are extremely important, because, for example, now it's very fashionable to talk about blockchain technology. And I do agree that it's a very interesting new technology where along the production chain, each of the players can upload their information, creating these blocks that go all the way to the product. But the thing is, and I know Matteo and maybe Sarah will not agree with me, but if I am a big brand and I create my own blockchain for a product, and I ask all my suppliers to upload their information along my chain, I mean, do you really think that my suppliers that depend on me for being, successful and being paid and having prosperity are going to upload anything against me or that goes against the grain? No. Everybody's going to say it's all hunky-dory and it's perfect and we're all fabulously happy in this, production chain. But there's no one checking. There's no third-party intervention. And sorry if I am like suspicious, but everybody can say anything. And if nobody checks, it's like, whatever.
Yeah. What do you think, Sara and Matteo?
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem is, also the fact of believing what people say. And as Marina was saying before, the fact of, creating laws in the fashion industry, because they're not really laws, because we have laws for everything, but there's not laws in the fashion industry. There's not laws that, to, commit, brands to follow them, because they've never been. So everyone does whatever they want. So obviously, what Marina says, it's completely right, and this is how things should work. Ideally, it would be the perfect way. I do think that we have to think in that way, but at the same time, we need really to begin to see the real changes and the real commitment of these brands. And I think this is the starting point. But obviously, then there has to be also the truth side of it, which is always a little bit tricky to understand. And that's probably one of the biggest, problems to solve, to know really if it's the real truth of everything. So that's also a very big other challenge to follow, to understand.
Because we need to defend ourselves from the greenwashing and the false pretense and make believe of the fashion industry. It's very important now to be very to put a big attention on this, because we have a big risk to be confused. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. There's a lot of information going around, and there has to be exactly. I mean, if laws are put into place, then half of the problem is solved, because you have to follow the laws, and if you don't, you should get very, very stiff fines and be reprimanded. But until these laws are put into place, there have to be, like Sarah said before, it's very important to give information. And I think communication, information, and the media also can do that sort of investigative journalism that can give, the consumers more information. I think that's also really, really important.
There is, I'm sorry, I don't remember the title, but there is a long film, a long documentary talking in detail about all the dysfunction of fashion.
The
And
true cost?
yes, exactly that. And when I saw that documentary, I started to see things in a completely different way, to shine on me, say, oh my gosh, how I lived before without knowing, without informing myself about the reality. So I think that really is a philosophical issue about our life. We need to be conscious where we live, how things works, and how we can change it. Patti Smith says, people have the power. And it's true. We have the power to change things, everything. If we stop to buy one label and to say no, till the moment in which you don't change your production distribution, because it's not solely a question of production, but also distribution, we will never buy again your brand. But we need to be very serious in this. I think that this kind of politics, so stop to buy, is probably the only way in which some brands can understand that they need to change at the time to change. For only a few brands in the world, sustainability is part of their DNA. And they actively do it seriously, not for show, but for a real interest about environment. Okay, I have a very strange questions. I ask you to help me in reply. Can you really call yourself a feminist if you buy fast fashion? Matteo, you can also reply with us, because now, gender is a fluid question, and your femininity side can help us to reply to this question. Who can help me in this? What do you think about this question? There is an answer or not?
It has to do with the fact that over 2/3 of garment workers are female, and unfortunately, girls, women, and I agree with the statement. You want us, we need, from an outside perspective, but not really. We're all humans. Male or female doesn't really matter to me. Can we consider ourselves like humanists? Can we consider ourselves human beings that care about humans? If we pursue an industry that systematically unfairly treats garment workers in order to give us products which are so cheap that they're not respectful of the value of humans behind them, but they're also dangerous for our own health and for the same system, a natural system upon which life depends. That's an open-ended question, but obviously the answer is no.
Okay. I would like to add some information that can give us good vibes about the future. As I mentioned before, we are in contact with many students, and I have noticed a real difference between what we asked 40 years ago to the students about sustainability, about what they apply sustainably in their creative process, and what we ask it this year, and how change are completely, how things are completely changing. So among the topics of the 2020 applicants, none was so displayed and relevant as sustainability in all its form. environmental, social, in the deepest sense, human, a constant threat implied across all the trends and all the choices. So using, upcycling, recycling, zero waste, natural colors and dyeing, organic textiles. So I think that now the schools are more aware how much is important to have specializing courses in sustainability in terms of production, but also in terms of communication and organization. Because sustainability means to reorganize everything in a company. It's not only a question of the products, but it's at the beginning, which is the source of your energy, how you use your offices, your spaces, how you use instruments. So this is very important. The schools are changing. The students started to think that is their own responsibility. It's not only anymore question of ask to the big labels to produce less, to produce better, to produce longer time products, but it became a question of personal choices, personal acting. So I think that still we need to do a lot of things. It's just the beginning of the process, but young people, especially in fashion schools, are understanding that they will be the next, the future of fashion designer, and they have a big responsibility in this. So, which is your opinion? We can do the last round opinion on this matter, if you agree.
Sure. Can I?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Okay, so I teach in many different schools around the world and in Italy, and I do agree that there is more awareness, even though I've noticed, unfortunately, in the last course that I've given here in Italy, I had 5 classes of purely Italian students, and then I had 1 class of international students. And I have to say that the awareness and preparation and knowledge of this subject among the international students was much, much higher than the interest and previous knowledge by Italian students. And this made me a little bit sad, and it made me think that in Italy we really have to put the foot on the accelerator on this, because how come I had this class of kids that came from Romania, Slovakia, Israel, Brazil, and they were like questions, and they knew things, and it was so dynamic. And then I have these classes of Italian kids. I mean, some of them were brilliant and fantastic, but the average was just like so apathetic and like flat, and didn't either know anything about it. They were surprised and happy to know more about it, but how come they had no idea? It is like, what's going on with our youth in this country? What is going on?
Probably because they are less far from the production problems that in Brazil or in Slovakia and in the other nation that you mentioned, there is the big production and the big problems for people and for environment. I don't know, just.
But I think we don't talk about these subjects enough in the schools. Yeah. I think that along with this educazione civica, there should be also something inserted. I was contacted by a senator here in Italy, because they are trying to pass a few laws about regulation of second-hand. And I said, is there a way that we can introduce a module, even with elementary school kids, that talks about sustainability in clothing and in buying and how it is. And she was like, yeah, you have to talk to the Minister of Education, and but I don't have an intro to the ministry. It's all like everything here. It's all so complicated and bureaucratic that you sort of lose enthusiasm along the way.
Lose also a lot of time during the way.
Yeah. So we need more education. These kids have they fall from the tree when you talk about this stuff, and it's unacceptable at this point. It's not what's going on.
What is your experience in these terms, Sarah? So what about your experience with students? You meet so many students, a young fashion designer during your work.
Well, no, I've noticed that a lot of students begin to think in more responsible way, even though that maybe in school, as Marina said, there's still not enough sensibility on this aspect. But obviously, they are very sometimes would say pissed off because of what's happening, and so they really want to make a change for themselves, but also to communicate. So what I see through students and designers, that there's much more awareness of making changes, and also about a lot of working with communities, because obviously seeing many international designers from all over the world, or people that maybe are in Milan but come from let's pose this year, which has been particular, but maybe come from different parts of the world, are aware of wanting to be international, but at the same time, when they think about their brand or their project, to think local, meaning traditionally of their country. And this is something that is coming very natural because about obviously what's happening around them, and that they are obviously challenged and they want to to make the change. But obviously this is not enough, because these are all people that maybe have a vision or the tools to get there. But I think that education, it's fundamental, and for who has the chance to have it, they need to understand better this aspect. So I do see, and it's very positive to see that the new generation is much more active on this aspect without even asking, because I see it when we see the projects together for it, or I see it when I'm in other jury sessions, or myself when I do research. Even though they are not asked to be responsible, they are naturally, because they want to understand how can they do it better. And then obviously it's our turn when we go to schools and do master classes or talks. I always tell to any kind of student or young person that wants, I'm saying, you're going out in the world of work, and if you want to do your own brand, your own startup, your own business, you have to just start from scratch, being responsible. Because if you start now from zero, you can start in the most better way that you could. And this is something that cannot be acceptable, of starting something which is not responsible.
Right. Matteo, the last
thank you. Following Marina's and Sarah, I think obviously education is key, and also revolutionizing education, like we're trying to revolutionize every single industry, and the economic system needs to undergo a paradigm shift. Linear thinking in education needs to change and be dismantled. The old school methodology of fashion design that teaches you how to design product, and needs to shift towards how can we make the product a medium to address the true needs of humanity? How can design become a tool, a polyfunctional tool, from clothing to a pen to a bicycle, to truly address some of our true needs, and incorporate systemic thinking into that methodology is key. It's something that I wasn't taught in school, and it's something that I encourage. We with Fashion Revolution, we reach almost 10,000 students a year at this point, from high school to college, and I still see every day this linearity of thinking embedded into the thought process, but it's very, very quick as soon as you give a spark and try to correlate agriculture to how a t-shirt is made, which is made of the exact same ingredients, water, land, and energy. then it clicks and everything changes, then perspectives changes, and the best solutions come forward to lead the kind of systemic change that we need.
So what we understood, I hope, during this panel, is that this process is not a reversible process. We can and we must change. Now we know production and distribution system and material that can drive a radical rewrite of what fashion is today. So it all lies in the will of producers and consumers from all over the world. So it's up to everybody to change things, and through consciousness, through communication, we can, I cannot say slowly, we can fastly change things for the future of our planet, of our child, for the humanity, and not only the humanity, for all the creatures who are in this world, because a lot of animals are suffering from fashion decision, and the planets and the plants and the trees and everything makes this world a wonderful place to stay, to be. So thank you very much to everybody, and good luck for ESOF to continue this event. Good luck to Trieste. Thanks a lot to my guests that are, first of all, my friends. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.